They towed my car over a fire lane, so I paid $300, came home, and proved the fire lane didn't even exist, then made my neighbor pay $5,000 to erase his own lie. The tow truck driver wouldn't even look me in the eye. He just handed me a clipboard with a $300 release fee and pointed at the cashier window like I was supposed to nod and smile and accept the whole thing. I stood there in that grimy impound lot, in the rain, staring at my car on the other side of a chain-link fence, and I felt something cold and surgical settle into my chest. Not rage, not yet, something quieter than rage, something that felt like the very first moment of a decision. I paid the $300. I drove home, and I started doing research. Let me tell you about Driftwood Lane, because you need to understand the battlefield before you can understand the war. Driftwood Lane is a narrow, two-lane residential street in a suburb that was built in the 1970s, back when urban planners apparently believed every household would own exactly one compact car and park it politely in a single-car garage and never, ever have guests. That plan did not survive contact with reality. The garages on our street, mine included, got converted into extra rooms or storage spaces sometime around 2005, which means everyone parks on the street, both sides, bumper to bumper, 7 days a week. Finding a spot on Driftwood Lane after 6 p.m. is like a competitive sport. There are strategies. People know the rhythms of their neighbors' schedules. You learn when the nurse on the corner gets home, when the family at number 14 leaves for soccer practice, when the spot in front of the Garcia's place opens up on Wednesday evenings. It's a whole ecosystem, and like any ecosystem, it has a predator. His name is Dale Hutchins. He lives at 22 Driftwood Lane, directly across the street from me, and he has believed, with the unshakable conviction of a man who has never once been told he was wrong about anything, that the public street parking in front of his house belongs exclusively and permanently to him. Not legally, not in any document or municipal code or recorded deed, just in the way that some people decide a thing is true and then build their entire personality around defending it. I lived across from Dale for 4 years before things went nuclear. In those 4 years, I'd watched him do the following: stand in the street with his arms crossed when visitors tried to park in front of his house, leave passive-aggressive notes on windshields. Once, and this one still makes me shake my head, he dragged his recycling bins into the street to occupy the space on a Tuesday morning, and when the garbage truck came and the driver moved the bins, Dale came outside in his bathrobe to argue with a garbage truck driver about property rights. The driver looked at Dale for a long, tired moment and then drove away without another word. I watched the whole thing from my kitchen window while drinking coffee, and I thought, this man is going to be a problem. I want to be fair to Dale, because fairness matters to me even when the person I'm being fair to doesn't deserve it. He wasn't always awful. In the early days, he was just prickly, a little territorial, the kind of neighbor you nod to and don't linger with. He kept his yard neat, he didn't throw loud parties, his dogs were quiet. In the grand spectrum of neighbor issues, believes he owns the public street ranked somewhere around a 4 out of 10. Annoying, not catastrophic. Then his son moved out, which meant one fewer car in the driveway, which meant Dale became even more possessive about the street space, because now it felt like his birthright rather than just his preference. And then the Castellanos family moved into the rental at number 19, a wonderful family, loud and warm and social, with 3 cars and frequent visitors and an apparent total indifference to Dale's invisible property claims, and Dale's 4 moved to a 7 almost overnight. He started writing letters to the family directly first, then to the HOA, then, and this is where things got genuinely unhinged, to the city, requesting that the parking zone in front of his property be designated as a resident-only space. The city, to their credit, wrote back a very polite, very firm letter explaining that Driftwood Lane is a public road, street parking is available to anyone, and there is no mechanism by which a private homeowner can claim exclusive rights to a public parking space. Dale did not take this well. I know all of this because word travels on a street like ours. People talk. Priya Castellanos, yes, another Priya, different one. The universe apparently has a surplus, told me about the letter campaign over our shared fence one afternoon, half laughing and half exhausted. The way you talk about a problem that's annoying but not yet a crisis. He actually called the city, she said. Like, multiple times. They stopped responding after the 3rd call. What does he want? I asked. He wants the spot, she said. He wants it to be his spot. Like, legally, officially his. On a public street. I thought about the garbage truck driver and his long, tired look. Good luck with that, I said. The red paint appeared on a Saturday morning in October. I woke up, made coffee, looked out my front window the way I always do, a habit, checking the street the way sailors check the horizon, and stopped. The curb in front of Dale's house, a stretch of maybe 25 feet, was bright, vivid, unmistakable red. Not old red. Not faded city marking red. Fresh, gleaming, hardware store red. The kind of red that still has that chemical shine to it. The kind that looks wet even when it's dry. And someone, and we all knew who, we all knew immediately, because there is only one person on Driftwood Lane who both wanted this outcome and was unhinged enough to pursue it, had painted it in the exact style of an official fire fire lane designation. Clean edges. Deliberate coverage. Like they'd used painter's tape. I stood at my window with my coffee mug halfway to my mouth. My neighbor had painted a fake fire lane on a public road. I want to tell you that my first reaction was outrage. But it wasn't, not exactly. My first reaction was a kind of stunned, almost admiring disbelief, the feeling you get when someone does something so audacious, so breathtakingly brazen, that your brain needs a moment to confirm it's real. Dale Hutchins had walked out of his house with a can of spray paint from Home Depot and had committed vandalism on city property in broad daylight, or close enough to daylight, because Priya later told me she'd seen his truck in the driveway at 11 p.m. Friday night and the paint wasn't there when she'd walked her dog at 10, so he'd done it in the dark, under cover of night, like a man who on some level knew this was wrong and had calibrated his schedule accordingly. I went outside. I crouched down and looked at the curb. The paint was smooth, even, applied in 2 coats by the looks of it. He'd been thorough. I straightened up and looked at Dale's house. The curtains in the front room shifted slightly. He was watching. I went back inside and I called Priya. "Did you see the curb?" I asked. "I saw it this morning," she said. Her voice had a particular flatness to it. "I took pictures." "So did I." A pause. "What are you going to do?" I looked out my window at the red paint gleaming in the October morning light. "Nothing yet," I said. "I'm going to park there first. I want to be transparent about why I parked there. It wasn't strategic, not entirely. It was also just the principle. I was not going to be intimidated out of a public parking space by a man with a Home Depot credit card and an entitlement complex. The spot was legal. I knew it was legal, and I was going to park in it." That Monday morning, I pulled my car into the spot in front of Dale's house, turned off the engine, and walked to work. I got the call at 2:14 p.m. It was an unknown number. A man on the other end told me my vehicle, he read off my plate number, had been towed from a fire lane at 22 Driftwood Lane and could be retrieved at Precision Towing on Industrial Boulevard for a fee of $295 plus a $12 administrative charge. I stood very still in the middle of my office hallway. My coworker Jamie walked past and mouthed, "You okay?" And I nodded, because I wasn't going to explain this in a hallway. "Who authorized the tow?" I asked the man on the phone. "We received a call from a resident reporting a vehicle illegally parked in a designated fire lane," he said. "Is that fire lane registered with the city?" I asked. A pause. "Sir, we respond to calls about vehicles in marked fire zones." "I understand what you do," I said, keeping my voice very even. "I'm asking whether that fire lane is registered with the city, whether it appears on the municipal fire marshal's map, whether it is, in fact, a legal fire lane or a painted curb." Another pause. Longer this time. "Sir, you'll need to take that up with the city. The tow fee is $295 plus 12, I said. "I heard you." I hung up. I stood in the hallway for another 30 seconds, breathing carefully through my nose. The heat was rising in my neck and I could feel my pulse in my temples, that specific physical sensation of fury that's trying very hard to behave itself. Then I walked back to my desk, sat down, opened my browser, and navigated to the city's municipal services website. Here is what most people don't know about public curbs. They belong to the city, not to the homeowner in front of whose property they sit, not to the HOA, not to Dale Hutchins. They are city property, maintained by the city, regulated by the city, and any modification to them, any paint, marking, signage, or alteration requires explicit written authorization from the Department of Public Works. Fire lane designations specifically are determined by the Fire Marshal's Office in coordination with Public Works, based on safety assessments, hydrant placement, and emergency vehicle access studies. They are not determined by a man with a bad attitude and a Rust-Oleum can. I found the city's Fire Marshal Public Records portal within about 4 minutes of searching. It showed a map, interactive, zoomable, beautifully detailed, of every registered fire lane, fire hydrant zone, and no parking designation in the city limits. I zoomed into our neighborhood. I found Driftwood Lane. The curb in front of 22 Driftwood Lane was not red on that map. It was gray. Ordinary, unrestricted, public parking gray. No fire lane, no restricted zone, no record of any application or permit for such a designation. I took a screenshot. I printed it. I printed 3 copies. Then I went and paid $307 to get my car out of impound, and while I stood at that grimy cashier window in the rain, something cold and surgical settled into my chest, not rage, but the feeling of a decision being made, and I thought very clearly, I'm going to be so thorough about this. That's when the real bombshell dropped. Because here's the thing I didn't know yet, the thing that transformed this from a neighbor dispute into something much, much bigger. I found it the next morning at City Hall, when I went and person to pull the physical zoning records and speak to someone in the Department of Public Works directly. The clerk I spoke to was a woman named Diane, mid-50s, reading glasses on a beaded chain, the particular brand of unhurried competence that comes from 20 years of dealing with people who think their problem is the most urgent thing in the building. I explained the situation. I showed her my screenshots of the fire marshal map. I showed her my photos of the curb. She looked at the photos for a moment. Then she looked at me over her glasses. "That's not a city marking," she said. "I know," I said. "I was hoping you could confirm that officially." "I can absolutely confirm that officially," she said, and her voice had shifted slightly, not louder, but more deliberate, the way people talk when something has just become a professional matter rather than a casual conversation. "That street has no registered fire lane. Any marking representing a fire lane on that curb is unauthorized, and painting city property without a permit is a Class B municipal violation." "What does that carry?" I asked. She typed something, looked at her screen. "Up to $5,000 in fines, plus mandatory restoration of the property to its original condition at the violator's expense." I looked at her. She looked at me. Something passed between us, not complicity exactly, more like mutual recognition of what was about to happen. "I'd like to file a report," I said. "I'll get you the form," she said. "I want to stop here and address something, because whenever I tell this story, someone always asks, why didn't you just talk to Dale? Why didn't you knock on his door and say, hey, the paint is fake, take it down, let's move on?" And the answer is, because of the $307. Because the moment Dale picked up the phone and called a tow truck, he stopped being a prickly neighbor and became someone who had taken money from me through deception. He had used a fraudulent marking, one he had personally created, to induce a tow company to remove my legally parked vehicle. That's not a neighborhood misunderstanding. That's fraud, and I don't negotiate with fraud. I document it, and I report it, and I let the relevant authorities do what they exist to do. Also, and I want to be honest about this, I was furious. I am a generally even-tempered person. I don't yell. I don't escalate. I do not enjoy conflict. But there is a specific kind of anger that comes from being on the receiving end of someone's contempt, from being treated as an obstacle to be removed rather than a neighbor to be respected, and that anger, in me, does not come out loud. It comes out organized. It comes out in triplicate. It comes out in every official form and municipal code and regulatory body I can find. So no, I did not knock on Dale's door. I knocked on the city's door instead. The Department of Public Works assigned an inspector within 3 business days. I know this because I received a letter confirming the complaint had been received and an investigation initiated. I also received a courtesy call from the inspector, a man named Roland, businesslike and efficient, who asked me to confirm the address and told me he'd be conducting a site visit. "Will the resident be notified?" I asked. "We notify the property owner of record that an investigation has been opened," he said. "Standard procedure." I thought about Dale getting that letter. I thought about the expression that would cross his face when he realized that his Saturday night craft project had become an official municipal investigation. I felt something move through me that I'm not going to call satisfaction, because satisfaction sounds too small. It was more like the feeling of watching a very complicated machine begin to move in exactly the direction you'd calculated. The same week, I filed a second report, this one with the police department's non-emergency line, specifically regarding the fraudulent tow. The relevant charge, I had learned from 2 hours of research, was procuring a tow through false representation, using a marking to be unauthorized to induce a towing company to remove a legally parked vehicle. It's not a minor thing. It's not a citation. Depending on jurisdiction and circumstances, it can rise to the level of fraud or theft of services. The officer who took my report was named Chen. She was thorough, asked good questions, and took copies of everything: the fire marshal map screenshots, the photos of the curb, my impound receipt, the phone records showing the time of the tow company's call. She told me to expect a follow-up within 10 days. I went home. I sat in my kitchen. Outside, through the front window, I could see the red curb gleaming under the streetlight. Still there, still brazen, still Dale's little masterpiece. Not for long. He came to my door on a Thursday evening, 8 days after I'd filed the reports. I saw him coming across the street from the front window, that particular walk of his, chest forward, chin up, the walk of a man who has decided to be aggressive and is trying to look like he hasn't decided that yet. I opened the door before he knocked. I'd like to say it was tactical. It was a little tactical. He stopped on my porch step. Up close, Dale is a big man, not tall exactly, but broad, with the kind of permanent sunburn that comes from years of outdoor work and a face that defaults to a kind of scowling impatience. He looked at me for a moment. "You filed a complaint," he said. "Not a question." "I filed too," I said. His jaw tightened. "You think this is funny? You're going to have the city coming around my house over a parking spot? Over vandalism of city property," I said, "and fraudulent towing. Those are the specific issues." "It's paint," he hissed, his voice dropping low in that way people do when when they're angry and aware they're outside and the neighbors might hear. It's some paint on a curb. The whole street parks better because of it. You're the only one making it a problem. Dale, I said, and I kept my voice very quiet, very calm, the way you talk when you want someone to hear every word. You had my car towed. You had my legally parked car removed from a public street using a marking that you painted yourself without any permit or authorization, knowing it was fake. You took $307 from me, and you did it because you think a public street belongs to you. He stared at me. Something moved behind his eyes, not remorse, not quite. More like the first flicker of a man realizing he has miscalculated the severity of a situation. I'll paint over it, he said finally. I'll put gray paint over it. It'll be fine. It won't be fine, I said. The city already has an open investigation. Painting over it now doesn't undo the vandalism. It just adds tampering with evidence to the list. He went very still. You need to drop those complaints. I'm not going to do that. I'm telling you. He took a half step forward and I watched his hands ball at his sides, and I held very still, looking at him with an expression I hope communicated exactly how unintimidated I was. I am telling you that you need to drop those complaints, or I will make your life on this street so difficult you'll want to move. I looked at him for a long moment. Good night, Dale, I said, and I closed the door. I stood in my hallway and listened to his footsteps go down the porch steps. I heard him cross the street. I heard his door close. I went to my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and typed up a detailed account of the conversation, including the time, his exact words, and his physical approach, because when someone makes a threat, you document it. You document everything. Always. The city's investigation concluded in 19 days. The findings were exactly what Diane and I had both known they would be. The red curb marking at 22 Driftwood Lane was not authorized by the Department of Public Works, was not registered as a fire lane with the fire marshal's office, and constituted unauthorized modification of city property in violation of municipal code. The inspector's report noted that the paint had been applied in 2 coats using commercial-grade spray paint. They'd found a receipt, apparently, or at least that's what Priya told me, and Priya's information was solid, and that the application had been deliberate and extensive enough to constitute clear vandalism rather than accidental marking. The fine was $4,800, close enough to $5,000 that Dale probably felt the full weight of the round number. But the fine wasn't the part one thought about most. The part one thought about most was the remediation order. The city required that the unauthorized paint be removed from the curb and the surface restored to its original condition. They specified, and this is the detail that I keep coming back to, the detail that makes the whole thing feel complete, that the removal must be performed by a licensed, bonded commercial contractor using approved methods. Not a homeowner with gray paint. Not a roller and a can of bear. A professional sandblasting crew, licensed by the city, with documentation of the work filed with Public Works upon completion. Dale Hutchins had to hire a sandblasting crew, out of his own pocket, to remove the paint he had applied with his own hands on his own initiative for his own benefit. I found out the crew was coming on a Saturday morning. I want to tell you I didn't watch, but I did. I sat in my front room with a cup of coffee and I watched a 3-person crew with professional equipment spend 4 hours removing Dale's masterpiece from the curb in front of his house while Dale stood in his doorway with an expression I can only describe as a man watching a piece of himself get removed from the world. The police report resolved shortly after. The towing company, presented with evidence that the fire lane designation was fraudulent, agreed to cooperate with authorities and confirmed that the call requesting the tow had come from a number registered to 22 Driftwood Lane. The small claims case I filed was almost anticlimactic by that point. The judge awarded me $307 plus $45 in filing fees, and I walked out of the courthouse in 40 minutes. The street in front of Dale's house is gray now. Plain, ordinary, public parking gray. There is a very faint ghost of red in the texture of the concrete. Sandblasting gets most of it, but not quite all, and on bright days you can see the shadow of what used to be there if you know where to look. I park there sometimes. Not always. Not to make a point, or maybe a little to make a point. I'm being honest here, but mostly just because it's a convenient spot, and it is, definitively and legally and with the full backing of the municipal government of the city, a public parking space available to anyone who needs it. Dale and I don't speak. This is not something I engineered. I would have been civil. I would have been neighborly in the way that neighbors are when they've had a conflict and moved through it, but Dale has made it clear that he has no interest in that, and honestly that's his right. He nods sometimes. Or he doesn't. It depends on the day. His yard is still neat. His dogs are still quiet. In every way except one, he is the same neighbor he was 4 years ago. Except that one way is a significant one, because he doesn't pull his recycling bins into the street anymore. He doesn't stand with his arms crossed watching people park. He doesn't leave leave notes on windshields. Whatever belief he held about his dominion over this particular stretch of public road, that belief has been, at the cost of several $1,000s and one genuinely humbling Saturday morning, revised. I told this story on Reddit because someone in a neighborhood advice thread asked what to do about a neighbor who kept coning off the street in front of their house. And I said, without thinking too hard about it, document everything, go to City Hall, pull the public records, file the reports, use the systems. They're there for exactly this. The thread blew up a little. People had opinions. Most of them were supportive. A few people said I was too aggressive, that I should have handled it personally, that the $4,800 fine was disproportionate. And I understand that perspective. I really do. But here's the thing about proportionality. Dale didn't paint a line on a road and leave it at that. He weaponized it. He used it to take money from me. He used it to watch me walk to an impound lot in the rain and pay to retrieve my own legally parked car from a fake crime I hadn't committed. The moment it became a weapon, it stopped being a neighbor issue and became a legal one. And I'm very good at legal ones. Priya Castellanos now parks in front of Dale's house on alternate Tuesdays. I know because she told me, laughing over the fence, that she does it on principle. The Garcias park there when they have guests. The nurse on the corner parks there when her shift ends late and every other spot is full. It is, as it was always meant to be, a public street on a public road in a city that belongs to all of us equally. Dale's curtains move sometimes when someone parks there. Old habits. But the curb stays gray. So here's what I want to know from you, because I've been sitting with this story for a while now and I still go back and forth on one piece of it. The sandblasting crew. Watching that happen. I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like something. Like justice, maybe, or the specific satisfaction of watching a consequence land exactly where it was aimed. But some people, when I tell them that part, get a little quiet. Like maybe that was a step too far. Like maybe once the reports were filed and the fine was issued and my $307 was returned, I could have called it even and moved on without standing at my window watching the whole thing. So I'll ask you straight, was watching that Saturday morning the act of someone who wanted justice, or someone who wanted something more than justice? Was Dale the villain here, or just a flawed, territorial man who made one genuinely stupid decision and paid for it at a scale that doesn't quite fit the crime? And the real question, underneath all of it, if someone takes something from you through a lie, how far is too far to go to get it back? Tell me what you think. Because on Driftwood Lane, we've got opinions on everything, and parking, especially, we take very seriously.
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.